Welcome to the AI argument. Justin Collery is there in the black hoodie. I'm Frank Prendergast, and we're
Frank.
going to talk about the latest AI news and probably argue about it.
Frank, I must tell you before we start, I am in a hoodie this week because I am deep undercover. You're a marketing man. I've seen Mad Men. And this is the IT equivalent of having the $600 shoes on and the glass of finest whiskey. You know, things have got serious when the black hoodie goes on. We're in hackathon territory. We're taking some LLMs this weekend and we're going to put them to task at the American insurance industry. I don't know what's going to happen, but by Monday we'll know something more. And for that reason, I've got the black hoodie on. We're serious in serious coding world. So that's where we're at. And that's why the hoodie is here.
That sounds pretty exciting. I don't know how much more you can or can't say about it, but can you share what LLMs you're going to be using and what you're exploring?
Yeah, so we'll look at the thing that I'm looking at first this weekend is we're using Anthropic, we're using Claude. And you know that I've talked before about Anthropic and Claude. I think it's brilliant. Haku in particular, I use it every single day. I think it's a fantastic model. And the stuff that I can tell you about is that we're certainly going to be looking at the different state laws in terms of health insurance and what you're entitled to and family leave benefits. And there's stuff that happens at the US level and there's stuff that happens at the state level. And everybody knows that the American health system is difficult to navigate and to understand what you're entitled to and where you would go to get help and stuff like that. It's a brilliant use case for AI and for LLMs because a lot of it's written in text and in contracts and in laws and stuff like that. And so we're going to take a very client-centric, client at the center type of view of this. And it's Frank, you are our client, you're insured by us and you're in America. And you're a little bit pregnant. I know this happens to you periodically. And what are you entitled to because you're a little bit pregnant? And this is going to go and find it. And one of the coolest tools that I've built in, I was working on it today, was Ask the Human. I love putting the Ask the Human tool into my AI. So when I'm building up these systems, I give them lots of tools. So the tool could be, read a law or look at your insurance policy or do whatever it is. But one of them is Ask the Human. And in that tool, it's, if you get a question and you need to ask clarifying questions, use the Ask the Human tool. And all it does is it sort of prompts the LLM to ask you a question. So if you get on and you say, hey, I'm a little bit pregnant, what am I entitled to? The first thing it'll do is it'll look up the laws and it'll know that depending on which state you are entitled to different things. So it'll say, oh, congratulations, Frank, I'm delighted to hear that you're pregnant. Can you tell me which state you're currently living in? And then you tell it, oh, I'm in New York. And then it says, oh, well, based on the New York family planning law, you're entitled to, and whatever, figure stuff out like that. So that's my weekend ahead of me.
That sounds fascinating and exciting and amazing. It does remind me of a news story that caught my eye this week. And I'm really curious to get your take on it because I think this is somewhere we have diverged in points of view in the past, where I kind of feel like with generative AI, we're seeing constantly that the user needs to be able to assess the output. Now, you're talking about a use case where the user would not be able to assess the output. And I know from talking to you that you believe that these systems will do a better job than humans at figuring out all this information and giving the answer.
Yes.
So I see things like it was New York City had a chatbot that was trained on materials that they had that were meant to tell people how to start and grow a small business in New York City. But apparently they found that it was actually giving people advice that would amount to breaking the law. So
New York, Frank.
So I'm looking at that and I'm like, okay, here's another instance where like it just proves the user needs to be able to assess the output. I'm guessing you're probably going to say that this model did not have the proper guardrails in place, or what's your view?
Well, no. So first off, right, yes, the AI will absolutely do every job that you and I can do and do it way better than us, and it's going to do that sometime in the next 5 to 10 years. I did notice, which should really, I thought it was brilliant, where we have these, what do they call it, evaluations, right? So you see these scores, Elio scores and stuff like that for the different models to evaluate them and see which one is better. And I saw, the original test was the Turing test. And I saw that, I saw a video, I can't remember who it was during the week, and they were saying, look at the Turing test has been passed. And these different coding tests and stuff like that, you know, they don't really, you can game the system. They don't really tell you a lot about the model. What we should be doing for the next generation of models is give them $100,000 and say, turn that into $1 million. Off you go, and see how long it takes, which I think is brilliant. I'd love to do that too. And I'd be really interested to see how they get on. I'd be quite confident that most of them will lose the $100,000. But in that instance, the AI is deciding how to make the money. Now, I'll tell you how to, I think it's okay. In your instance, right, in New York, I mean, how do I set up a business, you know, protection racket seems like a good idea. It sounds like what the LLM was saying. You know, you've got low overhead, you don't need much stock, and you just need to knock on a couple of doors and say, it's a nice shoe shop you got there, and you can make some money. So you have to go out and do the thing. So the human is still in the loop there. So there's no danger with that. Whereas with the one where I give you $100,000 and say turn it into $1 million, there is a danger there from your point of view.
But if it's like regulations based, if it's like, here are this, you know, if you go to a business consultant in New York City and you say, how do I set up a business? And they tell you, well, to comply with tax law, you've got to do X, Y, and Z. But the LLM tells you to comply with tax law, you have to do A, B, and C, and that's completely wrong, and it's actually illegal. I mean, surely that's an issue, because I have no way, like, obviously I know that setting up a business as a dodgy protection racket, you know, I can assess that, but I can't necessarily assess what are the steps that I need to take to be compliant.
Yeah, that's a good example. So that's a bad chatbot. That's a badly designed chatbot. It's really interesting, and it's not hard to fix those types of things in general. So what you would do is you turn the temperature right down to 0. You give it a body of knowledge, and then you instruct the chatbot. You know, make sure you use the system prompt and instruct the AI and say you must only respond with, you know, with articles from, or you know, with details from the articles that I've given you. And most of the modern capable AIs will follow the system prompt really, really closely. So I think that's okay. I wouldn't be too worried. That's just somebody writing bad software, rather than. And I mean, this has happened before. I tell you where, and I think you do want to get onto this, right? Is we saw with Google releasing the image, right, generator, which, you know, you'd ask for an English king from 1600, and they all appeared to be from sub-Saharan Africa. And you know, when I look at that as a software guy, I'm looking at that going, somebody just didn't test this thing right. You know, how hard is it to write some tests and just, you know, play with it a bit and see how it goes? And this strikes me as the same thing. Somebody just didn't test it right. And there's a big rush to get product out at the moment. There's an awful lot of companies, and they're all competing against each other to push out product and to do it as quickly as possible, and first mover advantage and all this sort of stuff. And I think you had another story during the week where it was very like maybe this time 25 years ago when we had a .com bubble. It has that kind of feel about it. How do you see it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so when we were chatting recently, and I was saying, you know, I'm slightly concerned about this kind of drive to just get as many users as possible, but a lot of the companies aren't necessarily profitable. And then since then, I've actually, you know, the way you start to notice things. Since then, I've been reading that people are starting to call it the .ai bubble, which, harkening back to the .com bubble, which is, I mean, that is what it feels like. I'm a big fan of Midjourney, and there's a report. I came across a report that's come out about the top 100 AI companies to kind of watch out for this year. And a lot of them were being ranked according to how much funding that they had acquired and everything. As a Midjourney fan, I love what Midjourney have achieved. So they've got a team of, last time I checked, I think it was 40 people, might be slightly more at this point, and they've got annual recurring revenues of 200 million with zero investment, and they are about to become a lot more profitable, I would imagine, because they have to give a portion currently of their revenue to Discord, because they use a third-party software, Discord, as the interface to the AI image generator. But they now have a web interface, and that's been rolled out to their existing users, and it's about to become completely public and available to anyone. I know a lot of people who have not been using Midjourney because they find Discord to be off-putting and complicated and difficult. this is going to make it so easy for them to acquire customers, and they are not going to have to give a portion of that revenue to Discord. So they're about to blow up, I think. So I love that about Midjourney. I definitely think that there is a bit of a .ai bubble going on in general.
Midjourney is every developer's wet dream, Frank. What I would give my left arm to be an intern in Midjourney on the basis that every single employee is in for a Christmas bonus of $40 million. I mean, it's just that's why we get into the software game. That's the sort of bonus we want to get. There probably is an AI bubble, right? And you say that as if it's a bad thing, but it's not a bad thing, right? That's how these things work, right? So we have a new technology which is widely acknowledged as being game changing. Which, let's say, that was the internet, back in the late 90s and the early noughties. And you have, like, when you think about it, right? Let's say when Amazon started, they started selling just books. That was the first thing. They only sold books. And I remember the first time I heard about Amazon and selling books, and I thought, well, that's a really good idea. A book is actually a really obvious thing to sell on the internet because they're all the same. There's no difference between a book. You kind of know what you're getting between one book and the next book. Seemed like a good idea. But look at what they became. They weren't a bookstore. They were a logistics company, is what, their reason for existence is that as soon as you click on order, within 10 minutes, that thing is on its way to you. And they try to get it to you within less than 24 hours. And so, but there's only one Amazon, and there's only one Google, and there's only one Apple, and there's only, one of these really big companies. And AI will shake out the same way. And because this is new technology, nobody knows what the best way is to use it. And nobody knows, there's an element of randomness about it. So you have all this money that's, sort of chasing, well, there's going to be a couple of big companies out of this. Which ones are they going to be? And, if you and me, Frank, get really wealthy and we set up a VC company, right? What I'll be saying to you is, Frank, we need to invest in 100 small companies, a little bit, as opposed to invest all our money in one. And that 99 of them are going to go bang. And that's going to happen in AI as well. Like, out of every 100 companies, 99 of them are going to go bang. And that's not bad, right?
Yeah.
And it means for people like me, it means the technology is going to advance really, really quickly. Because instead of having one company sort of slowly tripping along, we've got 100 companies all going hell for leather to get us the biggest, baddest, most capable AI that they can possibly develop. Fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's a fair point. And in general, I agree. I did read one analysis of this .ai bubble that was basically saying, look, the only company that's profitable here really is Nvidia, which it kind of reminds me, of all of those people, all those unethical marketers out there who are saying, become a six-figure solopreneur. I'll teach you how. And the way that they know how to become a six-figure solopreneur is teaching solopreneurs how to become six-figure solopreneurs. And they might have like 1 in a million that actually managed to make six figures. So it kind of reminds me of that a little bit. And so, yes, if it all shakes out, and if there are multiple successful companies, if it is like the .com bubble, then that's just the way things work, and that's the cycle. If in fact Nvidia are the only ones who are ever able to be profitable here, that's a slightly different scenario.
Do you know what I'm seeing, Frank? Something that's very different, actually. That well, maybe not actually. Maybe it is very like the .com boom, right? But what I see is that what will slow down. What I see is, from a technology point of view, what's happening right now is the technology will get pushed as quickly as possible, right? It'll go ahead, it'll go faster. And actually, it's inertia within organizations that will slow down the adoption of the technology. That's what I'm seeing. And this is such a huge fundamental change. I think in a lot of industries, what you're going to see, it's the Netflix versus Blockbuster type thing, where, and maybe even more pronounced than that, where for a lot of companies, they're going to be completely blindsided by this. And it's easier to start a company from scratch that's AI first. And it's right, we're going to do this particular thing, and we're going to do it with AI. That's just what we're going to do. Kind of like Tesla. We're going to make a car. It's going to be always electric, right? We've got this new paradigm, and we're going to focus on that, as opposed to taking, especially with big companies, taking this enormous company that's like a huge ship and trying to repurpose it and retool it. I think that's really difficult for people to do. And I don't know that it's going to be possible so there's going to be two crashes, I guess, is what I'm saying to you, Frank. There's going to be one crash, which is all the companies that tried something out and it just didn't work. And that's okay. And then there's going to be a second set of crashes, which are the traditional companies, which are going to get wiped out because of new companies that come along that use AI to make themselves more efficient.
And I guess kind of related to this is another news item that you brought my attention to, which was the Microsoft and OpenAI collaboration on this massive data center. Which
100 million, was it? No.
100 billion.
100 billion with a B.
Billion. Yeah.
Wow. And it was called Project Stargate. What a great name.
That was it. Wasn't Stargate, wasn't Stargate time travel?
Yes, it was. Okay. And it was, you could go from one place to another place. You jump in there and jump out over it. Yeah. There's definitely something there. 100 billion is an awful lot of money. Talk about mixed signals. I find it incredible. Between what is that Microsoft OpenAI relationship is so weird. On the one hand, Microsoft is going hell for leather to develop all these other models and their own models, and at the same time they're putting 100 billion into this for OpenAI. What do you think is going on there?
Honestly, I have no idea. But the reason that I thought that it was kind of related to our .ai bubble conversation was that the analysis that you sent me on made a very interesting point where they likened it to to Ronald Reagan's Star Wars initiative, which was to just show do a huge show of force economically. And they were saying that then caused the Russians at the time to just think, oh my God, we have to do something to compete. They did a big rush to make loads of economic changes, and that eventually led to the crash of the Soviet Union. So in terms of a .ai bubble, are they just showing a huge economic show of force here to push other AI companies out, or force them to overspend as well, which could serve to feed a .ai bubble even further?
Yeah, it could. I mean, the people I would say, if I was Microsoft, the people I'd be gunning for is your friends NVIDIA. So if I say that I'm going to spend 100 billion, that's a lot of tea, as my kids would say, a lot of peas there in 100 billion. And it encourages other people to come into the market. So if you were trying to, and they absolutely are trying to encourage other chip manufacturers to get into the market, promising to spend 100 billion, it's 100 billion, it's government level money. So it could spawn a new industry in chips, and that would drive down the price of chips. And that 100 billion data center might only cost 50 billion by the time it gets built, which would be incredible. Did you read some of the specs around how much energy it was going to use and why they hadn't started to fire it up yet?
No.
So there were some of the engineers were talking off record, and they were being asked, because they're already building some of these data centers, and they're building them in 3 or 4 different locations throughout the US. And they were asking, well, why are you doing that? Because that's quite hard, right? Technically, it's a difficult thing to do because you've got you got to make them all coordinated and whatever. And it was energy. They said, if we built that in one state and powered it up, it would bring down the power grid in the entire state.
Wow.
That's how much energy it uses. They use about the same energy as a state. Isn't that incredible? Mind-boggling.
This is why, I mean, Elon Musk has been saying we just won't have the power to reap the benefits of AI in the next couple of years, and why Sam Altman is so bullish on I can never remember which. I always get fission and fusion mixed up. So
yeah, the one where they stick together.
He's bullish on fusion, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Which we haven't figured out yet. But
AI
yeah, it's huge. That would be, I keep waiting for that. I keep waiting for the announcement that AI has figured out some whole new clean energy source that we just never thought of. That's what we need right now.
Yeah, it's coming. One of the interesting things that happened this week was not related directly to AI, but I think is I'm going to give you the in and I'm going to give you the out of this one. So I'm going to frighten you and then I'm going to pull you back again at the other side. So there was this thing that happened during the week where it was found that there was some malicious code in, I think it was ZX or XY, doesn't really matter, right? And it was in Linux, which is, as we know, open source, and it powers, every web server in the world and your mobile phone and all sorts of things. This was a super, super serious breach, right? Now, how it happened was super interesting. So it turned out that there was a very small piece of code that was stuck somewhere in the Linux library, and there was one guy who was just overworked. He does this for free anyway, and there was a bit of social engineering over 2 years to get at the guy until eventually somebody was able to put a piece of code into his code that created a backdoor and then allowed bad actors to go in and access any computer. If this had gone through, you would have had a backdoor into every payments processor, every web server, every, it was a big deal what this thing was, right? We don't want to go into the details as to exactly what it was, but it was that, right? Now, Frank, that one of my favorite games is if I was Al Qaeda, what would I do? Right. This is one of my favorite games. And before you think it's too bad, right? It's just a way of having a fun thought experiment of if I was a bad actor, what is the worst that I could do? Right. So if you imagine, right, especially with Linux and open source, because people, they like that and they think it's more secure. But if I've got a whole load of LLMs and I can put those to task monitoring all the open source projects, right? What I would do then if I was Al Qaeda is I would find the weak spots. So I'd find the maintainers who are overworked, or I'd have a profile, right? And I'd find not just one, but I'd try and find 50 or 100. I'd find lots of little systems. Linux is a big system, and this became obvious. Do you know how they found this particular issue? Oh, so beautiful. A guy in Microsoft was logging on to a machine remotely, and he noticed that it took half a second longer than it should do. Half a second.
Wow.
And he was just curious, and he said, oh, I wonder why that is. And he dug into it, and it was obvious from the piece of code that it was malicious and it shouldn't have been there. And he raised the flag, right? But what I would do is, if I was a bad actor, I would put a little piece of bad code in that module, a little piece of bad code in another module. And so they all have to work in connection with each other. So even if you spotted one piece of dodgy code, you're not going to know that it's dodgy, right? Because on its own, it looks fairly innocuous. And I'd have my AI write the code. So AI is going to do a good hack has two elements. The first element is a piece of social engineering. So I'm able to get at you. And then the second part is the technical engineering to put in the piece of malicious code. AI happens to be really good at both social engineering and writing code, right? So it's the perfect tool. So I've led you to the dark place, right? And I think and there was a lot of talk about that this was a state actor. They thought it was just one bad person, and then after, it's gone quiet now. But people think it may have been a state actor was doing this because it was quite sophisticated and it was over 2 years, right? So I'm a state actor, and I'm doing this, right? How do I stop this from happening? Well, to stop a bad guy with AI, you need a good guy with a bigger AI. Is the best way to stop it, right? Which is my jokey way of saying, right? You have AI go through the code, right? So you've got, let's say, Google Gemini. 1.5 million. You could probably put a lot of code into 1.5 million tokens, and you have it analyze the code for malicious software. And the best way to have it analyze the code for malicious software is to have it explain what every line of code does. And if you can't explain what a line of code does, chuck it out. It goes. If there isn't a good reason for it to be there, it shouldn't be there in the first place. And that would be really expensive if I was to do that as a human. But if I was to do that as an AI, well, that'll be very cheap and very effective. So there is a danger there. I guess the reason I'm raising this for you is there's a danger there.
Yeah.
And to be honest about the danger, but there's also a really good solution there. And I think a lot of the problems that we'll come up against with AI will be like that, where people go, oh my God, Bono's going to lose his job because we can clone his voice now. Said, well, there's ways we can sort that. There's things we can do. So I'm pretty sanguine about where things lie.
Yeah, except that maybe, the bad actors are highly motivated to figure out and exploit and execute on it. The good actors have to try to cover all the bases, and there's obviously an economic disincentive to do that, even though tackling any one of them would be a lot cheaper now with AI. But there's still kind of a trying to cover all the bases. Very, very tricky.
Always been this way though, Frank. It's always been this way. And I can tell you that for me, the biggest danger is not from AI. AI is not going to make paper clips to kill us all. The biggest danger is from a bad guy with AI who's desperate to kill us. That's way more likely. But I mean, a bad guy with a nuclear bomb will also kill us. And we have ways to stop it. You know what I mean? There are lots of ways for bad people to harm us. And this is just another way. And so having AI help us to protect us is a valid response to that. You know, it doesn't make the world more dangerous, I think, than it already is.
Yeah, I think it's probably best we don't go down that rabbit hole right now because we have 5 minutes left. And I'm not sure that I agree just because of the scale of possibilities that AI opens up for bad actors. But I think let's close out on something, another story, which is kind of not AI related either at all,
Yeah.
but it was meant to be. So this caught both of our eyes this week. And it was Amazon had these stores. And I remember reading about this when they were launching it. And I thought, wow, that is incredible. How on earth are they going to do that? Because I read this article, and the article made out like you had these stores, you just go in, you fill your bags, and as you're leaving, some mysterious AI is able to scan and photograph your bags and figure out what's in there. And I think they were supposed to weigh you as well as you left. And then they would be able to tell you, you didn't have to go to a cashier or anything. They would just charge your card as a member. And that was it. So shopping was just as easy as just walking in, grab the stuff, walk out, no queues, no nothing. Amazing. Blew my mind. And then we read during the week that they've all been shut down because there was no AI. There was a call center of people in India, I think, working on, whatever minimum wage in India is, which is a lot less than minimum wage in the States. And they were analyzing all of this material, and customers were confused because they were like, hang on, it's meant to be an AI automated system. Why is it taking hours for me to get billed and get my receipt? And it was because all these people in a call center were desperately trying to figure out what was in their bag.
I gotta put up a straw man argument in defense of Amazon.
Yeah.
It's unusual for a company as big as Amazon to do this, but I mean it's a totally valid entrepreneurial method to create a mechanical Turk. So if I have a technology and I'm not really sure if it's going to work or not, well, I can have somebody in the background pretending like it's the technology, and if it works, well, then it's worthy of putting in the investment and making it not a mechanical Turk but actually an AI system. But for a company as big as Amazon to have such an obvious mechanical Turk when the technology does actually exist. I mean, I think you could do that. That's the irony of this whole thing. I mean, how long were these stores up? When were they first set up? When were you first amazed?
I can't remember. I mean, it was months ago. I don't remember if it was a year ago. I'm really not sure. We'd have to go back and check the press releases.
I suspect it was even years ago. It might even have been more than a year.
Is my sense of time? I have a terrible sense of time, so I will accept it's possible.
Well, there you go. I win that argument. It was 5 years ago, Frank. Anyway, I don't give you time, but certainly the technologies.
I was just going to say, does this make some further sense out of this? Was it 4 billion investment in Anthropic from Amazon? Did they kind of go, oh man, we do not have this AI thing as figured out as we thought. Quick, invest in Anthropic.
I really hope so. I did a test today with Anthropic just because I think they're great. I did a test today where I got some old documents with handwritten stuff on it. There were documents that people had signed. Just like this was a 5-minute test. Scanned the document and said that you're a transcriber. Can you please read this text and output it for me? It's brilliant. It did really, really well. So I hope that is what it is. I hope that's what they're doing. But what an interesting story. And such a shame that if they closed down the stores, wasn't aware that they'd actually closed the stores as a result of this.
The system is certainly shut down. I'm not sure they're not using that system anymore, and they're moving to another thing which is kind of similar, but it's cart based. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and read about it, but it's scanners and cameras in your cart that figure things out as you put them in the cart rather than as you leave the shop or something.
You and me are probably different like this, Frank, now, right? Because you work in marketing, right? So you like talking to people, and I work in computing, right? So I don't. So when you go into the supermarket, do you go gravitate towards your self checkout, or do you go, no, I'd much prefer to talk to the person and tell them about my weekend?
I go to the self checkout, but I go to the self checkout because of the fact that there are now 20 self checkouts and 3 people at the manned checkouts, or two maybe if you're lucky, maybe two if you're lucky, and they've
Yeah.
clearly been instructed. You no longer, like, if you go to Aldi or Lidl and there's no self checkout, it's all manned, and they are under ferocious pressure from management to check people out as quickly as possible. You would not
Yeah.
believe the speed they go at. Then
Yeah.
you go into
Famous.
Tesco. You go into Tesco where they have all the self checkouts, and you do have some people at the cashier, but they can take all the time in the world. So I prefer dealing with a person, but not at the expense of being in that queue for 45 minutes.
That's, yeah. Whatever. I think, yeah, we can agree. I think I would. I mean, I would go. Sometimes I go in and I forget. I use the self scan. I don't even want to queue up for the self scan. I want the thing where I scan it as I'm going around the shop. So, because those things are never full, and then I'm straight zing, and I'll check out the queues, and whichever one is shorter, I'll dump the self scanner, or if I've forgotten to get the self scanner, I'll go around and get it because the other queues are too long. I think I love the technology, and I really look forward to it. It's totally doable, right? That I could scan your face, watch you as you go around the supermarket, and watch exactly what products you pick up. The technology exists, like, that's doable. They're doing it, a similar thing for health and safety in factories, so they can watch what tools people are picking up, and if there's an accident, it knows straight away that there's been an accident. So they can do it. I'm not sad. I'm disappointed in Amazon.
Maybe we'll end up at a kind of a compromised AI solution where we have empathic AI robots checking us out that we can chat to, but that can check us out really quickly.
They'll do a lot more than that, Frank.
Half an hour flew by again. It's been a brilliant chat as always, and I will chat to you again next week. And good luck with the hackathon. Hopefully you'll be able to share some interesting findings with us when we chat again.
Yes. And actually, we're not here next week, Frank, because
Good
I'm
point.
throwing
Very good
myself at
point.
the mercy of the Irish legal system. I didn't do it. I'm not guilty. So we will see everybody in 2 weeks' time.
Brilliant. Excellent. Chat to you soon, Justin.
See ya. Bye.